In 2017, Jeff Gephardt was camping with his family in Vermont when, in the middle of the night, he heard screams coming from the tent that his daughter was sharing with her husband and kids. "Dad, help! Coyotes are attacking our tent," she said. He ran out and was immediately confronted with a rabid fox that was attacking him. Hi, I'm Jim Riley. This is Jim's Friday Freakout, and welcome to What's That Noise? Camping Edition, Part 2. Okay, on that horrible night we're talking about, Jeff Gephardt was able to grab the fox, pin it to the ground, and then somebody else got an axe and they were able to kill it, but not before it bit Jeff. He, of course, needed to get rabies shots. So this is something that's not unheard of when it comes to camping. Some of the animals that are most likely to carry rabies are raccoons, skunks, foxes, and bats. The advice that comes from Vermont Game Warden Lieutenant Justin Stedman is, if the animal is being particularly friendly, particularly aggressive, or just falling down, the stumbling, the drooling, the best thing to do is to stay away from it. Actually, that's the exact same advice he also gives on his dating website. So bats, interestingly, are often the culprits when it comes to humans getting bitten by a rabid animal. And both the federal government's Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, and the Indiana State Department of Health focus their rabies and camping safety tips on bats. One of the tips that they offer is don't leave children unsupervised in caves. So you might want to get on that. Moose can stand up to 6 feet tall at the shoulder. They can weigh up to 1,000 pounds, and they don't know much fear of people. The males can be aggressive during the mating season. The females can be aggressively protective of their young in the spring.
Moose that lick their snout, pin their ears back, or raise the hackles along their spine or shoulder hump are showing signs that you have invaded their space and are about to attack.
And there's another reason that moose might be a danger. Highlighted in a 2012 story in the Daily News about a Vermont man who went out of his house to discover a moose with a hoof on his car. He said it almost looked charming because it had ivy tangled in its horns, but when he tried to shoo it away, it charged him. He was able to get away. The Vermont Fish and Wildlife people came and shot it, and the cause was what they all suspected, brainworm. That's actually a thing that moose get. It affects their judgment, it affects their behavior. If you see a moose stumbling around drunkenly, don't go anywhere near it. Brainworm. So if they find a moose fell off a cliff and died or got hit by a car, brainworm is often involved. But remember, brainworm or no, dogs off of leashes seem to be one of the things that provokes a moose to attack. So you might want not to have have your dog off a leash when you're in moose territory. There was some advice on the nationalparkservice.gov website that sounded a little bit like you and the moose may need couples therapy. It suggests that if you see a moose, talk to it softly and look for signs that it's upset. Good advice in any situation. But one of the things they add is that unlike a bear, you can go ahead and run because a moose is unlikely to chase you very far. Awesome. The actual camping parts of camping, like being in a tent, sitting by a fire, they seem to be pretty moose friendly. I couldn't find any instances where a moose just came into somebody's campsite and attacked them. Snakes. The Abilene Reporter News talked about Jackie Bibby, who is also known as the Texas Snake Man, and said that he is going on the TBS series, The Go Big Show, and that he holds the world record for being in a sleeping bag with the most rattlesnakes. It's 109, by the way. So here you can check out this video of Mr. Texas Snake Man doing his thing on a show. I don't know if it's a TBS show or not, but here he's in, of course, a see-through bathtub, so you can see the true horror of what's happening to him. But I know that's not an experience that I want to have. There are 4 kinds of venomous snakes in the United States, broadly speaking. There are rattlesnakes, copperheads, water moccasins or cottonmouths, and coral snakes. So there are also other snakes that can bite hard enough to hurt, but they're unlikely to do any serious injury and they don't carry poison. I've been bitten by a small black racer snake while I was untangling it from netting over a garden. And despite the fact that I had gloves on, I could feel those teeth right through the gloves, and it wasn't a very big one either. Actually, some good advice on how to protect yourself from snakes while camping comes from our friends down under, expeditionaustralia.com.au. One of the things it suggests is not having food around. Now, you wouldn't think Like, do snakes eat human food? No. But snakes eat the things that eat human food. Keep the rodents out of your tent, you're more likely to keep the snakes out of your tent. So there's another organization, snakebitefoundation.org, that has as its goal to reduce snake bites in the developing world, but it has a thing or two about the United States. And one of the things it says is that if somebody is bitten by a venomous snake, bad first aid is worse than no first aid. Here's one of the things you need to know, that rattlesnakes are a type of viper, and because of the type of venom they carry, you do not want to use pressure bandages. You do not want to use tourniquets. It can make a bad thing worse. And also, weirdly, going back to the early 1900s, there was this weird idea that electroshock can render venom non-toxic. Not true. So if somebody gets bitten by a venomous snake, don't hook them up to a car battery out in the woods. Oh, and by the way, sometimes it's the person's own fault. There was a July 2015 story on the Sierra Club website saying that a man in San Diego had a $135,000 hospital bill after taking a selfie with a rattlesnake. Apparently, he adjusted the snake's position to get a better picture. Avalanches. Not a lot specifically related to camping on this issue. Most avalanche victims are skiers, but some are hikers. There were one exception is an infamous incident, and now this goes back to 1959 to the Soviet Union. What's known as in the Dyatlov Pass in the northern Ural Mountains, there were 9 experienced campers went out in January, set up their camp. They were later found all of them had died with a lot of traumatic injuries like broken ribs, cracked skulls, stuff like that. And apparently, looking at the situation now, because I mean, at times this has been attributed to everything from Yetis to UFOs, that it was a small avalanche of very heavy snow that suddenly crushed their tents and injured them in the middle of the night. So one of the disturbing elements of people that are injured in avalanches is that they often have some clothing missing. And that is now attributed to a type of hypothermia called paradoxical undressing, where the body, in going through the stages of hypothermia, thinks you're too hot. How messed up is that? And you start taking clothes off. There are actually several articles about this phenomenon of paradoxical undressing on the National Institutes of Health website. Crazy local people. Anybody my age or older probably remembers that tune. That's called Dueling Banjos, and it was featured prominently in a 1971 movie called Deliverance, where 4 city folks decide to canoe down a river in a rural part of Georgia, and end up basically getting attacked not only by the natural elements, but by crazy local people. It became an archetype for urban people going into rural America and having awful things happen to them. Now, while this movie, Deliverance, is well respected artistically, it was very much resented, and deservedly so, by the local folks. When you think about all the suffering that Appalachia has gone through during history, including in recent times, to now they had a movie crew come down and make them look terrible. In fact, the director, John Borman, specifically asked a local person to go out and find everyone he could with a physical or mental disability so he could put them in a movie. So what does that have to do with a real camping experience? My research indicated that the number of people camping killed by crazy locals is 0. There are people who have been killed camping, but in an incident I mentioned in our previous episode where someone was killing people on the Appalachian Trail, that happened in Virginia. And that person doing the killing wasn't a local person. He was from Massachusetts. He was another hiker who was out of his mind. So here is the danger, though. On that river, it's called the Chattooga River, where they filmed Deliverance back in 1971. It became very popular to do rafting and canoeing on rivers with rough rapids after this. And in the period of time after that, in 4 years after that movie came out, 17 people were killed on that river, according to the U.S. Forest Service. They just didn't have the skills for it. Buzz Williams, who's an executive director with the Chattooga Conservancy, said that these were just ill-prepared people coming down there. They didn't have life jackets. They would end up getting hypothermia. So based on the research, a person who lives nearby to where you're camping is no more likely to kill you than if they're living near you, if you're at home, or if they live near where you shop or bowl or ride the bus. Now, to get back to a little bit more realistic danger,
Fuck! Fuck! Oh my God!
lightning. National Geographic says that camping is second only to fishing in terms of putting you at risk for death by lightning. It's not golf, which is what a lot of people think. Friends at Canada.ca explain, now, who knew being hit by lightning could be so complicated? There are a lot of different ways that lightning can occur and kill you. One is ground current, where you're not directly hit by the lightning, but when lightning hits the earth, it has to dissipate to the point where it's no longer at a lethal dose. And just the difference in charge between how close 1 foot is to where the lightning struck and how close the other one is can cause the lightning to travel through your body and kill you. It needs a 15 to 30 meter radius to dissipate before it becomes safe. Side flash, you're standing next to a tree. The lightning hits the tree, comes partway down, and for some bizarre reason decides to jump over and make the rest of the trip to the ground through your body. Why? Contact. You're touching a metal fence, it gets hit by lightning. No surprises there. Upward leaders. Sometimes a positive charge shoots upward from the ground. And if you're in the way of that, even though it has less voltage than a downward strike, it can still kill you. Direct strike, pretty self-explanatory. Blunt trauma. This is where a shock wave on the ground throws a person up in the air and they end up getting hurt. Let me leave you with this disturbing Lichtenberg figure. This is a pattern on the skin. Doesn't it look sort of like a reddish tattoo or some henna thing? Well, that is, or looks like lightning captured by a high-speed camera. That's a scar that can be left on you by being hit by lightning. That's if you live. So the conclusion, I hope you understand that this business of not going into the woods because of the dangers in camping was very much tongue-in-cheek. You are far safer camping than you are driving to the campsite on the road or doing a lot of other activities we do all the time. The chance of a bear attack is way lower than the chance of getting injured in a car accident. And if you want to avoid being murdered by local people or anybody else, go camping. So with the exception of lightning, which does seem to be a greater risk when you're camping, but still pretty darn low, the best way to avoid an accidental death is to get out of your car, go camping, and get some exercise. So I want to thank Unsplash, Outside Magazine, the Associated Press, New York Times, many talented photographers providing free photographs on Unsplash, John Thomas, Tobias Markmeyer, Johannes Plenio, Brianna R., Marc-Olivier Joadin, Kirk Thornton. I also want to thank Atlanta Magazine and a lot of other great sources. Thanks for joining us. Good night.